Our next speaker is Simon Koch Lipumba. He is remote sensing scientist at the European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites, EMUTSAT. He works in the field of scatterometry, maintaining the scientific software used to process data from the current ASCAT instrument. He is also involved in the development of calibration and validation software for Europe's next scatterometer, SCA, scheduled for launch in 2026. In addition to his scientific work, Simon actively promotes open source development within EMUTSAT and is the author of metopdataset.jl, EMUTSAT's first Julia package. So I welcome Simon Koch.
Thank you for the presentation. It's hidden here. It works? Yeah. Is it possible to read the title? Maybe I can zoom in a bit more. Yeah. Okay.
Could you increase the lighting of your
Yeah, but I think the lighting of my screen is not connected to the projector, is it? I think it's just the projector needing to warm up. Yeah. Okay, but I'll start. The talk is named Exploring Metop Data with metopdatasets.jl. But first I just want to give a little bit of background about what is Metop, what is EUMETSAT, the place I work, and why is this package even needed. So let me start with EUMETSAT. EUMETSAT is a European organization for meteorological satellites. We establish, maintain, and exploit a European system of meteorological satellites. So we have a number of different member states throughout Europe. It's most of the European countries. And they each have representatives, delegates that kind of come and tell us what our aim should be. And most of these representatives are from the national meteorological services. So we work closely together with the national meteorological services throughout Europe. We also work closely with the European Space Agency, ESA, which is a separate organization. But we have a lot in common with them, and we work closely together with the ECMWF, which is the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, and then of course also with the WMO, which is the World Meteorological Organization. One of our further objectives now is also to monitor the global climate. So traditionally we have been very focused on the aspect of the data for meteorological application and for weather forecast, but we also have an increased focus on the climate aspects. And in reality, when it comes to the data, there's quite a lot of similarities there. But when you talk about delivering this data to users, there's quite some difference because for weather forecasting, it's very important that the data arrives timely. So you don't want data from yesterday. You want the data as soon as it's recorded. Where for climate data, it's more about long-term stability and calibration of the missions. Yeah. So The METOP satellites is a satellite series that flies in low Earth orbit that is operated by us at EUMETSAT. So in that sense, we consider them our satellites. We also operate other satellites, but I will focus on these satellites today. Originally, it's part of the program called EUMETSAT Polar System, EPS. So sometimes when you see data from the satellites or you hear about the satellite program or the data, sometimes the acronym EPS is used instead of METOP. It can be kind of confusing sometimes, as it is with a lot of satellite programs, but it's similar to, there's a Copernicus program, but then there's the Sentinel satellites. And the reason why you have a program is because the program also incorporates other things like the software on ground, the compute infrastructure on ground, the operation centers, funding for ground stations so we can communicate with the satellites. All of that is under the EPS program, but it's only the satellites flying in space that's named METOP. So that's where the distinction comes. So often in daily use, sometimes the terms are used interchangeably as synonyms, but there's like slight different nuances to it. So the satellite series consists of 3 satellites. The first was launched in 2006. And were operational until 2021, where it was decommissioned. And then we have 2 missions still flying, 2 satellites still flying. And they are in a sun-synchronous low Earth orbit. Let me just go to like a small rendering of the satellite. This is a small picture showing the satellite. So this is one of the satellites, and it's not a small satellite. It's a quite large satellite platform that has a range of different instruments. So these satellites do not just fly one single instrument, but they fly a number of different instruments, each targeting different parts of the Earth system, important for meteorology. So let me just, I listed the main instruments here, and I highlighted 2 in black, and that's YARCI and the ASCAT. And the reason I highlighted those 2 instruments is because I'll show examples of the data from these 2 instruments today. I did not have the time to show data from all the different instruments, even though it could be interesting. We need to focus a bit. Personally, I am part of the science team for the scatterometers. So my specialty is really with the scatterometer, the ASCAT instrument. So that's where I know the most, and you can ask me all the difficult questions. When it comes to the other instruments, I have colleagues that knows much more about them. So I mean, I also know a bit, but it's not my specialty. So the YARCI scientific team doing the level 2 processing is also using a bit of Julia inside EUMETSAT, and have also contributed to the package METOP datasets. So I thought it was quite fitting to show some of their data also, both because it's interesting, but also because they have contributed a bit to this package. So more about the package. I started to author this package, both to be used internally at EUMETSAT, but also to be put out and registered publicly so others can use it. And the idea of it is that it's just a package to read some of our products from the METOP satellites, which are in a native binary format. So this binary format can be kind of complex to work with. We put out the format specifications as documents, so you can go and open the PDF, you can look at the tables, you can see where the different binary values are supposed to be and how many bits and bytes each field is. But and previously we also put out some IDL tools and some different tools to read this data, but I lacked a more modern interface. So I started to make this package in Julia with the idea of using the Common Data Model API, the interface, which have been done by Alexander Barth, which is also here, such that these products can be opened and viewed and work with kind of similar to the way we work with NetCDF files with NC dataset to abstract like this complexity of these formats away. It should be said we also have data in other we depending on which data product you're looking at, we have them in different formats. So this is really just targeting this category of products because it was lacking. Just to talk a bit about the supported format. So actually, these native formats have quite a lot of structure in common between the different satellites, but they are between the different instruments, but they are actually unique for each product. So each product have a different binary layout inside the data records. So I just started with implementing ASCAD because I used it myself, and we use it a lot in our team. And then also the Yasi products because they are used by the Yasi team. But then I've started to also add some of the other products and have gotten most of it, but a few is still missing. I mean, but they will come soon. I mean, we're working a bit on it here and there. Just to list. Maybe one of the good things why this is interesting, a lot of this data is freely available. So a large chunk of these different products are freely available at the EUMETSAT data store, and even more is freely available if you are for a non-commercial and non-operational, personal, educational, or research purposes. So there is example. I mean, I know because I work a lot with ASCAD, the ASCAD level 1 product, the low-level ASCAD. If you use it for operational purposes, so you put out a service where you sell some data that are operational, where you process it each day and send out the product, then you have to contact EUMETSAT and arrange for a proper license. But if you use it for research, it's still free. I just wanted to show the data store quickly. So the EUMETSAT data store looks like this. You can go in and there's a lot of product. You can see and select, and there's 170 you can search. There's this advanced search functionality where you can choose a platform and or sensor type. But what I just want to go and do now is I want to have a look at the formats. So as you can see, we have data in quite a lot of different formats, and I did not make a reader for the NetCDF files because there is already a NetCDF reader in the Julia community, so it's not needed to make a new one. But what I did was I made for these EPS native. It's called EPS native here. So these is like there's 20 different products. It's not all of them that are unique. Sometimes there are different versions of the same product. I can explain a bit at some point, but I mean, we have the operational ones, and then sometimes we go through the whole data set and we reprocess it to make it more homogeneous and make sure that the same version of the process and the same format specification are used throughout the whole time series. And then we store that as data records, but I mean climate records. But mostly we have the interfaces like that. You can access the data. It shows a panel. You can draw a box where you're interested, or you can just search by time. show the results. And there's some products. You can see the overlap. The ASCAD products are distributed in one orbit at the time. You can click download on the little download button. It requires that you have made a profile and logged in, and then you can download and access this data. There's also the possibility to access the data via API. So there is like a command line tool in Python, or a command line tool called UMDAG that is made to do this either via the command line or in Python. That there are some documentation on, but there's also just an API that if you know a little bit about web app APIs, you can program something that sends a request and ask which product are available at a given time, and then you can use the download API to download it together with an authentication token. But it requires a bit of setup. Yeah. So data available at the data store. So I hope that makes it a bit more interesting that you can actually get the data. Yeah, so I just made some, I took a couple of examples. So I just downloaded some products, unzipped them, placed them in a folder, and have made some small visualizations here. I won't go into like really deep into application. I just want to showcase some of the data as it is, and it's mostly due to a time constraint. I mean, mostly due to a time constraint, but also because in my job I actually don't work so much directly on the application. I work a lot on making sure that the observations are there and that they have the correct quality, so that we deliver quality observations over and over again. And then the question of the application is something that handled more outside the organization. It should be said that these examples are also part of the documentation page for MedUp dataset. So most of these examples here, I've kind of modified from the documentation page to fit into this Pluto notebook to make it a bit interactive. That said, making the notebook, I figured out that maybe Pluto is not always an ideal way to work with these data sets. I thought it would be nice for this presentation, but normally I don't use this interactive way. Yeah, so first I want to talk about ASCAD, which is the instrument that I'm actually working on, and it's a fixed beam C-band scalerometer with 6 antenna beams. Maybe I just scroll up and show. It's better to show on the. So here you have these 3 arms, and that's actually the ASCAD instrument, like the front end of it. On each side of the arm, here and here, you have a radiating panel, which I know you have an antenna panel. So each arm have 2 antenna panels. So in total, that gives 6 antennas. And the reason why we have 6 antennas is because we want 3 antennas viewing the right side of the satellite and 3 for the left side. So we actually have 2 swaths. These antennas are C-band radars. So it's kind of similar to what was shown in the SAR presentation earlier today, where we get backscatter values back with intensity. But these 3 antennas are, first of all, it's not SAR because it's not, SAR stands for synthetic aperture radar, and we're not able to do the synthetic aperture. This is a side-looking radar. And it's because it's tuned for coverage, to like coverage large extents, and also to be able to operate doing all the orbit without any data gaps, and not so much focused on resolution. So our resolution in like the primary products we send out from ASCAD is 12.5 kilometers. So it's quite a larger pixel size that we have. grid size that we have compared to the SAR. But I mean, it's also for a different purpose. So the main use of this data is actually once we have the backscatter from 3 different beams, which correspond to 3 different directions for each swath, we are able to retrieve wind vectors. So we can retrieve wind speed and wind direction over the ocean, and over land we can retrieve soil moisture. And these results are then assimilated into numerical weather models. So whenever you have whenever you look at a weather forecast, it's probably either use a global weather model or it uses a global weather model as a boundary condition. And for that global weather model, that have been assimilated some observation, and that is likely to include ASCAT and YASI and some of the other data shown here. So that's like a big usage is actually that is just assimilated into the models to continuously improve the predictions with observations. Some meteorologists also get the data and look at it directly. The wind vectors and the soil moisture, I won't talk so much about them today, and it's mainly because they're available in NetCDF, so they're a bit unrelated to this package. But the backscatter value, the level 1 product, which is more the direct observation of the instrument, that we only put out, or that we put out in the native format. So I'll take that as an example. So maybe I just go down here. So I imported the package METOP datasets. I just did that in the bottom. Because of Pluto, I don't have to do it in the top. But then I'm able to open the path to the file, and then I get this dataset out. And the printing is done by the common data model. So it should look a bit like when you open a NetCDF file with a NC dataset, or if you use SAR datasets, you get the same sort of printing where you can explore what's actually inside the dataset. So we have the dimensions, we have 3 bands. It's because we have each one is images by 3 radars, and then we have 88 across track samples. Actually, that's 41 in one side of the satellite and 41 on the other side. And then we have a number of lines, along track samples, and that's just the long track sample corresponds to 1 orbit, which is 1.5 hours. There's a lot of variables here. I mean, so internally we also use to send these products out, and then they are further processed. So they include a lot of auxiliary information needed to do all this further processing. But I have some examples where I just extract the important things. Or not the important things, but the main variables that represent the observations, and not all the flag fields and other things that are attached. Yes, so this is the key. Here I just get the name of the variable that we are actually mostly interested in. That's is the sigma naught trip. I didn't name this. I auto-generated all these names based on the format specifications. So in the package there's like a CSV file included that I took from the format specifications. So that's where the naming and the description comes from. But this actually contains backscatter values, which is a bit equivalent to what we saw with the SAR. I think maybe we have plotted the amplitude there, but this would be the intensity. We don't have any complex phase in this, because with our pixel size, it doesn't make sense to talk about that. Just to read the data, I just have an example here where If you used other of these data sets package, you probably encountered a lot of missing values, which makes them hard to plot. So just for this example, I use NaN values instead of missing values, which makes it a bit easier to work with and to plot. One thing you have to be aware of is if you have encoded flag values, then like this flag field, which actually bit encodes different flags, then it can be converted to a float 64 because there's no int NaN values, and then when you try to read which bit corresponds to which, it can get kind of messy. But I mean, it's a bit of a corner case, I would say. Yeah. So we read the sigma not as just as a full array. I just read it up front, and I mean, the values are in decibel. Just for the ones who already work with backscatter. For the ones who haven't, it's numbers. But yeah, you can get this three-dimensional array out just with numbers, and then we can get the latitude out on the longitude, and that's just two-dimensional arrays with the corresponding locations. For the longitude, this example I use GeoMagi to plot it, so therefore I translate the longitude so it goes from minus 180 to plus 180, and not from 0 to 360. But that's just a little detail. The data also contains a usability flag. So, if that's set to 2, it means that the data is bad. If it's 1, it's, I mean, in the case of ASCII, if it's 1, it's usable, and if it's 0, it's good. And so I just check for that to include that in my plotting. But as a general note, actually, for now that it's Julia EO and for all the people here using Earth observation data, I just want to encourage people to sometimes actually look at the flags in the data. Because actually as data providers, we often include flags in the data to tell you about the data quality. And sometimes there are some data in there that we know are bad. So using these flags can sometimes improve the quality of the science that you do by simply actually taking a look at the flags and making sure that that you're removing data that are not good. So here I made an interactive visualization with VGL-Magi and GeoMagi of the data. And I mean, here you can see the data in the file. It's a backscatter going from roughly, in the forebeam, it's roughly from minus 10 to minus 25. And it's covering a whole orbit. I mean, we have 3 different beams. I just chose one of them to plot. We can also plot the after beam instead. It will look quite similar. But this is one orbit of data. Because it's projected into a 2D map, it looks like this kind of weird wavy motion on the map. But as Anshul showed yesterday with the presentation of on GeoMagi with the globe axis, it is actually just the satellite orbiting the Earth in a circle projected down. Yeah, we have 2 swaths here. So one on each side of the satellite, and then the satellite would actually be orbiting here in the middle in the white part between them. Let me just zoom in to show a little bit more. I mean, this is just a scatter plot. Now it's interesting if it, yeah. This is just a scatter plot of the data. I sometimes just do scatter plots of all the observations because it's robust and it kind of always works for me enough. So I just scattered a lot of points here, but what you can see is we have a higher backscatter over land and a slightly lower backscatter over the ocean from the forebeam, and then we see some variations inland. And I mean, these are the things we use to derive the soil moisture and the wind speed. But I won't go too much into detail. What I might be showing, can I zoom out a bit? Let's see. I made some, can you see there's some red observations here? I just colored the bad observations red. So we actually have some bad observations in this. And it's because if the water is too calm, we get very little backscatter back to the satellite. Most of the energy is reflected away, and we have a low signal to noise ratio. So we actually don't have so much signal coming back to the satellite corresponding to the noise. And in those cases, we actually flag the data. But there can also be other reasons. I mean, sometimes, depending on where you look, if there's like a lot of radio interference, or if we have an orbital maneuver of the satellite or something like that, we also flag the data in those cases. Yeah, so this is just an initial plot of the ASCAD level 1. We have 3 beams, so you can also visualize it with different colors. So that's what I did here, where I just took the forebeam and mapped it to red, the midbeam mapped it to green, and the afterbeam and mapped it to blue. And then you get a color visualization. We sometimes use these color visualizations for presentations like I do now, but they're actually not so good for analysis and interpretation, because the colors are kind of highly dependent on the viewing direction of the satellite. So it's not an easy way to interpret the data, but it's an example of how you can extract and work with the data in Julia. So that was an example of ASCAD. I mean, I just won't go through all the plotting code, but it's available, and I will put it up on the GitHub repository if you wanna expand it and have a look on how it's done. Yeah, the second instrument I will talk about, give an example of, is YASI, which is an infrared atmospheric sounding interferometer, and it's a quite different instrument. So ASCAD was a radar. It's an active instrument. It sends out a pulse. It listens for echo. It has its own things. Where YASI is a passive that just it measures the infrared spectrum. So it has like over 8,000 channels where you measure the infrared spectrum, and then using that, you're measuring the infrared radiation from the atmosphere mainly, and because you measure the radiation from the atmosphere at so many different channels, you are able to invert it and say something about what would be the temperature profile and humidity profile and the amount of trace gases that could give this spectrum. So you are able to derive temperature and humidity profiles. That's also where the name sounding comes from. Sounding is often getting these profiles of the atmosphere. Yeah, so again, we can open the data just by giving the path to MetUp datasets. It opens it, and you are able to go and explore it. Again, this dataset have even more variables. So I mean, you can get a bit started with it just by going there, but I mean, you have to actually read a bit what the variables are and which to use, because there's a lot. But I have extracted the important ones, which are the spectrum and the location of each observation, and there's also a cloud fraction included. So I just, for this visualization, I have a better visualization that maybe I will show in the end of my talk. But for this visualization here, I just selected 2 points, and in the data. So we have this is actually one scan line as the instrument flies over. No, the satellite, as the instrument flies over, it scans in lines, and this is one scan line, and then it's taken west of France in the ocean, and I've just chosen two different points, a bit of random, one with 100% cloud coverage and one with 0% cloud coverage, and here I plotted the spectrum as a brightness temperature. So I mean, actually in the data it's stored at radiances, but often to work with it and visualize it, it's better to convert it to brightness temperatures. So brightness temperatures is this thing that if it was like a perfect black body we were looking at, just one single black body, the spectrum would just be a flat line at that temperature. But because it's not a black body, it's not even, I mean, we are looking at the integrated radiation for the whole atmosphere, and the atmosphere have different gases, we get these different spectra. But what you can see is that the one with the clouds is much colder because you don't get, I think this is actually a quite high cloud, so you don't get any radiation below the cloud, so you don't see the hot part of the atmosphere, where the black one here is like clear sky, so you see all the way through the atmosphere and also see the lower part, which contribute kind of a lot of warmer radiation. And I mean here I just this is a plot I took from our website that actually have labels on some of the spectral lines you can see in the spectra. So we can see that we have some ozone lines, we have some methane, we have some water vapor, we have some CO2. So from this spectrum you're also able to derive something about the trace gases in the atmosphere and how much ozone there is. Maybe I can zoom. I know I don't need to zoom on this. So that was the level 1. That's again, it's kind of the direct observation of the radiances the instrument actually sees. The level 2 is YASI product. It is actually also in the native format, so I thought it would be interesting to show that. And here it's retrieved, so you're retrieving temperature profiles and humidity profiles, and also profiles of trace gases. I won't show all of it because again there's a bit too many things, but just I selected some single retrieval outside the coast of Africa from one of the files, and what you can see is that here we have retrieved the temperature profile from the spectrum. We have found out what the corresponding temperature profile would be, and the water vapor profile. And you can clearly see here in the temperature profile that we have the tropopause and the stratopause, where the temperature gradient changes. And in the water vapor, you can also see that in the lower atmosphere there's more structure. I don't know. In the lower atmosphere. So right now it's plotted versus pressure because that's how it's stored and how it's calculated. But it is possible to retrieve it and like find out the equivalent heights. But I mean, lower pressure is higher up. So so that's the level 2. And I mean, these data are freely available and can be used. And now there's also this Julia package to read some of them. I think mainly now the usage is inside EUMETSAT, but since the usage of the Julia package is inside EUMETSAT, the data is already used quite extensively, especially by the meteorological services. But this Julia package is something that we use inside inside EUMETSAT, but now it's also available to you if you want to have a look at some of these data. And there's quite a lot of data available. So yeah. Now I will stop this notebook. Wait, I open this link. And then I stop this notebook because I want to show another example. I have many interactive examples, but I don't think I have memory enough to run all of them at once. So that's why I'm stopping and starting a little bit here and there. But yeah, I put this to run, and then while I do that, I can talk about the latest thing that I have started is called MetupPy, which is actually just a Python wrapper on Metup datasets. So there's quite a large community working on open source software in Python for especially the geostationary satellites data, and also for some of the optical instrument like images. But they're working in Python and in the PyTroll community and have like a Python package called SatPy, but they don't have this so much support for these native formats from Metup. So I've started together with one of my colleagues to make this Python wrapper. So we just try to make a Python wrapper around Metup dataset. And I mean, so far we just did it and it works quite well. I mean, quite easy. For me, at least, I'm not a Python expert. I just tried it out and I think it works easy. I mean, you can pip install it and then you can use a package from Python. Under the hood, it's still under install Julia and set up the environment and stuff. So it's a bit of a large dependency, but my hope is still that maybe in the future that I can include this as an optional dependency to the SatPy package, and thereby like bridging the gap between Metup dataset and what they have been doing to kind of unify the efforts a bit more. But this is very much an ongoing thing. So the first thing we've done is just to make the Python wrapper. And then the next thing we will have to do is to make sure it's good and then figure out how to integrate it well with SatPy. But I'm trying to do a bit of effort to also make this available where some of our users already are. Yeah, so that's MetupPy. Then I have to see. Yeah, okay. It's still thinking. So what I wanted to show after is I wanted to show an interactive example showing some of the spectra from the Yasi instrument. So in the documentation page, maybe I also need to zoom in here. I made some examples, quite some examples. It's also where the things shown in the notebook is from. Maybe it helps if I shut down the notebook. And here we have I made an interactive example with the Yasi data together with GLMark and Tyler. So the whole idea is that the one orbit of this Yasi level 1c is actually quite large. It's like 1 gigabyte, and that's like the compressed version when you actually convert the data to floats and scale it and everything, it grows. But because of this package, you can lazily load the part of the spectrum that you want from the file. You don't have to load all of them. So I made this interactive example that hopefully it will run. If it's not, I just have this picture where you kind of have Tyler in the background and then you have a scatter plot on top showing the cloud fraction. So we can see how much cloud there is, and then we can zoom in and out to see where we have the observations for this orbit, and then click on the individual observations to see their spectrum being displayed in the bottom. So that's kind of a nice thing that is able to do with like all these visualization tools in Julia to like interactively explore the data a way you wouldn't have been able to before. Okay, it's slowly coming here. But in general, I would say that yeah, we have quite some different data. The thing with this low-level data is that it's quite often on the grid of the satellite, and it's like because we try to. It's a bit giving the observations close to how they're made, because that gives some good properties if you want to assimilate it into weather models and you want to know where the observations come from. But there are other derived products that are available sometimes from some of our partner organizations. We also have data from a lot of from other satellites. So we are involved in the Copernicus programs where we operate Sentinel-3 and Sentinel-6, and also process quite a lot of data from them. Also Sentinel-5 coming up. But I think maybe that data is more available through the Copernicus services and not through our user portal. I'm not completely sure. But besides that, we also have the geostationary satellites to show images from. Whoop. Patience is my friend. Hopefully, yeah. Now it works. Okay, so now we can see we have a bunch of observations here. They actually comes in groups of 4, but that's how the instrument is made. So it actually have 4 detectors inside the Yasi instrument. So it takes 4 samples at the time. And I plotted the cloud fraction on top here in white, and I made so you can choose one spectra, and then you can choose another. I think maybe in the example in the documentation, it only supports one. Yeah.
Question: is it just me, or is there more of a gap between like the 2 rows of measurements as you go to the side?
Yeah.
Compared to when you go to the side?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to be sure.
Yeah. There is. I think it. There is more gap between. I don't know. I think it's an artifact of how the instrument is scanning and recording, and actually also these locations here. I don't know exactly how they are, at which height. Maybe it's the location of the surface or the thing, because you're actually looking at a column of air at a diagonal through the atmosphere. So the observations on the side, I mean, if you're analyzing the spectrum, you have to take account that they're actually more angled, where the observations straight under the satellite are in zenith. So there are some differences there. I mean, it's there's so many rich information in this data, and I mean, sometimes there's a lot of it that you don't need, but that's the way the observations are made. I mean, we don't have this many instruments pointing perfectly nadir downwards. It's one instrument that scans, I think. Yeah. So here I just let me say I take one with a cloud. I take one without a cloud. It's actually not so big a difference, but you can see in this case the one with the cloud is slightly colder. So if we take one spectrum here, the green one is near the tropics. Then let's see if we can find a clear one up here. Oop. Okay, maybe that wasn't so good. Clear one here. Clear one here. We can see there's some temperature differences between the the two column of air, right? Because one is shifted slightly down with respect to the others due to simply that it's a warmer column of air, the one place than the other one. I'm again, I'm not a specialist on the Yasi, so I have some colleagues that could tell you way more about it. I think there was also an example here where you can see that there's some low clouds and some high clouds. Yeah. So I mean, both of these observations are cloudy, but there's quite a temperature difference because one of them is like lower clouds and the other one is higher clouds. Yeah. So so this is an example of how you can. It's a visualization of the data, but it's also an example of like how you can interactively visualize it with all these cool packages we have in Julia and combine it to actually explore this quite large data set without having to have like all of the data in memory at once, but just be able to jump between and see how it is, and the different. I mean, some part of the spectra you don't see any. You see very little difference, and other parts of the spectra you see a larger difference, corresponding to where in the atmosphere you're getting the radiation from. So that's. I actually have. If I have time, I have. We shut this down. I just wanted to show in the end also a geostationary picture. So I mean we launched 2 years ago. We launched our next generation of geostationary satellites. The data is also out there. It's freely available. There's a lot of different bands, and it gives like a full disk scan every 20 minutes now. So each 20 minutes you can get like a full disk scan of the Earth, and it has quite some here. It has some different channels. So I mean the first channels here are visible, but the first 3 roughly corresponds to red, green, and blue. So that's the one I will be plotting in this example, just to show how it will look. Roughly corresponds to red, green, and blue, and they're available in a 1 kilometer resolution. But I mean, as you can see, we also have much more wavelengths in the infrared also, which makes it which is quite good to track clouds at night. So also when we're on the night side, you can also see the clouds and the movement of the clouds. Yeah, let's see if this shows, and otherwise maybe we can just start with the questions. I think maybe there's also a chance that Felix will show it later. Okay, no, but let's just start with the questions, and then when they come up, I will show you an example of the geostationary images.
Thank you. Thanks for this great talk. I have a rather basic question from somebody not using SAR data. So I know that when you work in optics, it's quite challenged to get many bands. So especially hyperspectral satellites that just can cover a wide range. But I'm so impressed to see that in SAR, you see when you click on one one location on the map, then you get a full spectra, really high resolution spectra.
That's not the SAR. It's hyperspectral infrared. It's the YASI. So it's a different instrument. It's a hyperspectral infrared interferometer. So it works with mirrors and
okay.
So maybe I mix it in, but
okay.
the ASCAT is a radar instrument on the MEDOP satellite, and then the YASI is an interferometer also on the same satellite. But it's two completely different instruments, tuned completely in different ways.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And the main use case of this hyperspectral microwave or infrared, is this for tracers in the atmosphere, or?
So the main use cases is actually to assimilate it in numerical weather models. So I mean, when you look at a weather forecast, if we today look at the weather forecast for Friday, it says something with some quality. But if we look tomorrow, we expect it to be better. And the reason why it's better when we look tomorrow is because between now and tomorrow, we have assimilated a lot of observations from today of what's actually going on in the atmosphere. So we extend our knowledge of what we know. And for this, YASI is quite important. So this hyperspectral infrared, I think it's quite up there in the list of how much skill it improves numerical weather forecasting. And it's basically because it helps correct information about what are the temperature profiles and the humidity profiles throughout the entire atmosphere, and not just a point measurement on ground, but actually gives information about the whole column. I think for the assimilation, they might only currently use the clear sky observations and not the cloudy ones. But I think there is a lot of work on the weather forecasting side to also include what they call all sky assimilation, where they also take the infrared sounder over the cloudy region. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But it's also used for trace gases and monitoring of ozone and these other things, atmospheric chemistry.
I want to know if you provide some gridded product where you inpaint the data over the whole globe, or maybe only over the ocean, that can be used in simulations?
So the short answer is no, not right now. So when it comes to observations, we don't have these gridded global observations now. I mean, there's talk about doing something like that because of the whole AI trend and AI things. And the idea is here to maybe resample and reduce the quality of the observation a tiny bit to make it much more accessible. But right now, if you wanted to have these global well-gridded data, what people often do is that they use the ECMWF weather models, the reanalysis data, which actually that actually contains all the satellite observations within, because like the satellite observations are assimilated to correct the model. So that's kind of the combination of satellite observation and model to derive a good gridded product that covers everything and not just the bands that the satellite covers. Oh, yeah. Here I have a picture I found that I thought was pretty of the Earth. This is from our geostationary satellite that we launched 2 years ago, and it provides operational data. Every 20 minutes you can get a picture like this covering the whole globe, and it's freely available. So you can just go get it, and it's at 1 kilometer resolution. So we can zoom in, and then we can see all the different cloud structures and how the clouds are moving around. I mean, it's a bit reddish in the colors, but that's because I just did a simple visualization where, I mean, as I said in the start, the 3 bands roughly corresponds to red, green, and blue, and that's why the image looks a bit more red than it's supposed to. But I like than you would expect. But yeah. So this is an example of the geostationary satellite. I mean, we also have a large record of our older generation of geostationary satellites, but this is the newer one that have been for that was launched 2 years ago. And actually, one thing I also wanted to mention. Now I showed the MedHub some data from the MedHub satellites. We actually have just started launching the second generation of MedHub satellites with improved new next generation instrument, and the first was launched in August, but it's still going through calibration and validation, so there's not operational data yet, but soon it will be out, and then we're launching a new one this summer. So the next generation of this type of data I showed is already on its way, and this time they have chosen to put it out in NetCDF from the very start, so it makes it a bit easier from user. This geostationary satellite is also in NetCDF.
How high is this? Sorry, how far from the Earth is this?
How far from the Earth? Oh, I mean, so it's a geostationary orbit. I think it's 3,000 kilometers. Yeah, I can't remember on the top of my head. I should be able to know, but it's very fixed. I mean, you can just Google geostationary orbit, and then it comes out how far it is. Because I mean, it needs to fit with the rotation of the Earth. Yeah, 30,000. 35. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, those are also out and available. I mean, yeah, if anyone have use cases, I just showed 3 bands.
Excellent talk. So earlier you showed the color scale representation of the data collected from different imaging geometry, and you mentioned that because they are not directly comparable, this presentation is not directly usable for interpretation. Is there any way to account for those geometry effect to somehow normalize them in some way so that this data from different geometry are more comparable?
Yeah, I mean a bit. So I think with the soil moisture retrieval, I mean the soil moisture retrieval is done in collaboration with us, but it's also done by TU Vienna, the Technical University of Vienna, as part of a collaboration through something we call the HAF. And I think they derive like a lot of lookup tables to kind of both remove effects of the azimuth direction and also effect of the incidence angle over land to kind of standardize it and derive what they call an equivalent sigma 40, which is like the equivalent. And because that's nice when they try to do the change detection for soil moisture. But so there's ways to account it. But actually, I mean, when we do the wind retrieval, we rely really a lot that it depends on the direction. That there is this directional thing. So I mean, there we just always, when we derive wind direction, we always derive it relative to the line of sight of the mid beam, and then you correct for the orientation of the satellite afterwards before you send the product out to the users.
Yeah. So it looks like even this differences itself is probably useful information for the speed retrieval.
Yeah, it is. But I still think it's hard to do when you look at it as a visual product. I mean, when you do the analysis and with optimal estimation, it's different.
Okay.